little, I've always admired Japanese culture for some reason, but after I started kind of like getting into it and kind of trying to figure out why I admired them so much, it really comes to show if you look into like Japanese philosophy, concepts, the way that they do things, the habits that they have and everything. And also kind of looking at statistics on like how Japan has the longest living people, it has the lowest criminality rates, it has a lot of healthy people in general. You really see that they have to be doing something right that we are not doing and that we can implement into our daily lives. And one of the biggest dreams of my life this year was to go to Japan for my 30th birthday. And when I went there, it was also really nice to kind of like see all of these things that I had been reading about to kind of play out in real life. So I wanted to give you 20 ways or 20 habits that the Japanese have that you and I can implement into our lives to live a better life, because I feel like the Japanese know a lot of things that we either have forgotten or ways that we maybe used to do before. Are they just like really aware, or they really carry a very like, I don't know how to say, like a very well-connected balance when it comes to like the spiritual life and the daily life, and they kind of found a really good middle ground in this. So let's get started. The first thing is being kind and not only thinking about yourself, but also always thinking about the other person. And something that I've seen and heard from Japan is that they have a very collective way of thinking, and it is completely true. Like whenever, like I've been in Tokyo and I've been in like a lot of different parts of Japan, so I feel like it doesn't matter if it was like a big city or a little small town. You could see that people, like whenever they went into the subway, whenever they were doing queue about something, people were not ever bothering other people, because people there are really mindful of like, I'm not gonna bother you if like we all can live in harmony. And another thing that really surprised me, for example, is that I would see like 5-year-olds walking on the street at like 9 p.m. at night, and I was always so shocked, because like even in Barcelona, which is like not a super scary city, but like it's still like not the safest place in the world, for example, you will never see such a little child walking around the city. And when I asked some of like my Japanese friends or like people from there, they were like, oh, anyone who sees that child on the street will see them as like our collective child, and they're gonna try to protect it. So it's like, it's common sense, you know, like no one's gonna try to hurt that child, because we think as like a bigger entity, if that makes sense, and we don't think as individualistic as maybe other cultures do. And that's something that I feel is very beneficial in certain areas. It's probably also the reason why Japan is such a safe city. Like I've never seen anyone get anything stolen from them. Obviously there's people stealing things in Japan, but like I've had friends, for example, forgetting things in a train, coming back a week later, and that bag with their money and everything was still there. No one had touched it, because people would be like, oh, if this is not mine, I'm not going to touch it because this is from someone else. And I'm obviously I don't want anyone doing this to me, so I'm probably not going to do it to them, which is something that I feel in other Western countries we like seem to have forgotten, because we think more like way more individualistically here. The second one is the concept of Kaizen, which is kind of translate into continuous improvement or always be improving, which means that the Japanese don't see things as like a failure, being like, oh, I'm not really good at this, and they don't beat themselves up as much about things. Instead of, they're just like, well, I am here right now, and I'm gonna see like from the mistakes that I'm making or from what I don't know how to do now, like how can I improve, how can I get better, how can I take the mistakes that I've made to do something out of it, instead of just like wallowing and being in this state of like, oh, I'm never gonna get better, I'm so bad at this. They're just like, no, continuous improvement. It doesn't have to be perfect today, it just needs to continuously improve. And with that way of thinking, I feel like there's less frustration, and you're always kind of focusing on taking anything that happens to you as a way of like, okay, how can I learn from this mistake and how can I move forward with this? And I think that's amazing. The third habit is to look for beauty everywhere that you can, and if not, to create beauty as much as you want. If you ever look at like a Japanese house, they might be like super simple, they don't have to be like oversaturated with a lot of things, but you will see that either like Japanese people, like I've also seen this with like my Japanese friends and everything, is that they might be in like the most normal place and they will be like, oh my god, that little vase there is like so beautiful, because they will be, it's kind of like they train themselves to kind of be looking for beauty everywhere. And if they don't have beauty, for example, in their house or in their workspace or whatever, they will create or implement little things that make the place beautiful, because it's a way for you to kind of like live in this harmonious state where you know that there's like visual harmony everywhere that you go. And if not, like you can either look for it, and if you don't find it, you can also create it if it's in your means, of like putting a plant here, looking, I don't know, putting a little thing that reminds you of your family, something like that, where like it makes any space that you're in like a nice place to be, and it makes it like a comfortable place. It's kind of like, I think, or at least I see it the way that it's kind of for you to create home wherever you go. The next one is simplifying things, and I think it's no coincidence that Marie Kondo was a Japanese woman who created the method of like tidying up your life and how to make your life like less cluttery and more simple and more like structured, if that makes sense. And I think something that I've seen in like Japanese houses whenever I've been to like someone's house is that there's no unnecessary clutter there. Like there might be things that decorate the house. It doesn't mean that you can't decorate it. It doesn't mean that need to be like super minimalistic. It just means that you only have things that are super necessary for you so that your energy is focused. Because like if there's unnecessary things around you, your energy is going to start kind of like spreading everywhere. And you're also going to kind of like complicate your life with things that don't necessarily need to be there. For example, like if you have 1,000 different things that you're like, oh, I'm going to tidy it up later, or I'm going to have these things just in case I need them one day, it's not going to be helping you, because seeing that while you're, for example, let's say like you're working at home and you have all of this clutter around you, it's going to take your energy away, and it's not going to allow you to focus on the maybe task that you need to be doing. Like if you need to be writing, I don't know, something for your work or whatever it is, it's always going to take that energy away from you. So I feel like the Japanese are really mindful and aware of that. So they try to like help yourself, or help me to kind of like focus and direct all your energy to whatever you need to be doing, so that there's no distractions. Another thing is that they're very detail oriented, and what I mean by that is like, for example, when it comes to like the craft of making sushi, for example, someone who makes sushi in Japan, like they will have to have perfected that task for like a few years to kind of like consider themselves like a master on that craft. And you, for example, you and I might be cooking sushi in the kitchen and we might do whatever and we're like, oh, it's fine enough, it doesn't really need to be like that perfect or something, but we might be distracted, we might not be giving it like all the attention that it deserves. And something that I've seen with Japanese people is like they are really like aware and like concentrated when they do something, and they give it their 100% of attention. And I feel like that's something that we here are like a bit more ADHD distracted all the time, and whenever you give your 100% of attention to something, it really shows in the result. Doesn't mean it needs to be perfect or anything, it just means that you've given it all the attention and all the care and everything that it deserves. And it doesn't even need to be for like a process or like an object or something. It can even be to people, you know. Sometimes like you might be like kind of having a conversation with someone and you might be like thinking about other things or what you need to be doing later, or taking your phone out and texting someone else. And it's like something that I've seen is like Japanese people are very like focused in like, let's put all the energy towards this one thing and let's do this thing right, instead of trying to do like 100 things halfway. And I really like that. Another thing is to have your ikigai, which in Japanese kind of more or less translate into like reason of being, which it doesn't need to be something that's like this huge thing, because I feel like in the Western culture we always approach the whole thing of like having your purpose or something as being like this super grandiose thing, and it doesn't need to be something like that. I really like how the Japanese divide the ikigai into these 4 things of like something you're good at, something that you can get paid for, something that you love, and something that that the world needs, and kind of like finding the point of like that connects these 4 things for you, that you can kind of like wake up every morning and that gives you a reason of being. And it also, like as I said, like the Japanese see it as not something that needs to be like this huge thing, it just needs to be something small, because it could be, I don't know, for example, like giving food to the dogs that live in your neighborhood, and that could be something that covers these 4 things and like is making the world a better place. And it's not like this life-changing thing that the world needs, because sometimes I think that when people think of purpose and something that the world needs, people think like, oh, I need to be changing the world. And sometimes, yes, you can be changing the world, but you can also be changing the world in like very small ways, and it's still beneficial and it's still meaningful, you know. Next thing is taking care, obviously, of what you eat and having a healthy, balanced diet. If you look at a Japanese diet, actually Japan is probably like one of the countries where like if you try to get fast food and find cheaper fast food than like healthy food, you're not gonna find it. Because everywhere we went in Tokyo, for example, and we wanted to have like a normal like Japanese breakfast, which was like a little bit of miso soup, little fish, rice, maybe natto and something else, that would always be cheaper than McDonald's and other like fast food chains. And I feel like it's because like in Japanese culture they found a way to like make very simple food that's really good for you, and it's always be like, it's going to be so much simpler to make than any fast food processed crap that you can eat, that it's first thing, it's going to be easier for people to just like go choose the cheaper alternative that's also better for you. but it's also going to make people be really aware that that's what they need to be eating. And it's not only that, but also the fact that people are also, I feel like whenever I've seen Japanese people eat, I mean, obviously there's going to be the people who like work at an office, they come, they eat their noodles or something and they go again. But I've always seen a lot of people in Japan, for example, like eat in silence, eat like very concentrated on what they're doing, eat their noodles or whatever they were eating before going back to the office or something. But they were kind of like very, like, as I said before, like they were focused on this one task. Instead of like being on their phones or doing a lot of like 30 other things, they were just like, I'm eating now, I'm going to be doing this task now, and that's it. And another thing is also like something that I've heard, especially when I was in Okinawa, from people there, is like, you don't eat until you're full, you eat until you're satisfied. And I feel like sometimes people kind of mistake full and satisfied for the same thing, but it's not the same thing. Being full means that you're like overflown already and like there's too much in your stomach. Being satisfied means like you got to the point where like this is what your body needed and it's not more than that. I feel like Japanese people in general, they don't believe in excess in any kind of way, and when it comes to food it applies the same way. And I think that's a very healthy way of seeing food, instead of just like eating too much or eating too little as we do here sometimes. Another habit is giving time and energy to things that drain your energy. It's not only like things or tasks that are meaningless in itself, not that they take or give energy, just like tasks that are just like useless, but also like things that take away your energy. And like I feel like the Japanese are very like good on like optimizing, is the word optimize? I think so. Optimizing time and like resources and everything. So they will always be like, okay, if I have this task that I just finished at work and I have an hour in between, instead of just like wasting this time, like going on Instagram, doing something, which for example, like going on social media maybe drains your energy, it means that the next hour that you have to do another task that you're like programmed to do or something, you're not gonna have the same energy. Instead, they might be like, okay, how can I optimize this hour to do something that's productive or something that gives me energy? Like for example, let's just rest for an hour because I will need the energy for the next task or something like that. And I feel like we here waste so much energy sometimes, like that we could be using for our own like projects or whatever it is that we just throw away to like things that we don't really want to be doing, jobs that we don't really want to be doing, or like whatever, you know, just like being in this limbo of like, oh, I'm just going to be on TikTok for an hour or just do this or that, which like there's nothing wrong with being on social media if you do it mindfully. But if you're always like giving away so much of your energy, you're obviously gonna regret it in the long run. This is one of the things from them that I also really admire, and it's being able to sit in silence with yourself. And because that's something that I actually saw a lot of people in Japan do, like eat by themselves, not be on their phones, or even be on the street, like in the park, just sitting there, just like looking at the nothing and just feeling life, if that makes sense. And I don't see people here comfortable enough to sit in silence. And I know that I used to be one of the people who was not really comfortable enough to sit in silence. And for me, when I started meditating, it was so hard because I was like, oh, I can't be like with my thoughts by myself because like there's a lot of negative shit in here, you know? And I feel like, I don't know why it is. I don't know if they're trained differently. I don't know what they are like taught in schools when they're little, but they don't seem, I mean, they probably have like negative thoughts because we all have them, but it seems sometimes like they are really more able to kind of like sit in peace with themselves, or they know themselves better. Obviously this is a very general term. There's obviously going to be a little bit of everything, but I've realized that especially in Asian cultures in general, like not only Japan, but in Asian cultures in general, I've seen people be more comfortable, or Eastern cultures in general, honestly. They've been more comfortable with like sitting by themselves and just like being with themselves and kind of like not having to hear all this clutter, because we live in a world that's like very noisy at the moment, and you can like whenever you want to like not have silence, you can just open your phone, you can open your TV, you can go into the street, you can have everything, and there's going to be noise everywhere. And that's something that you can even see in like the physical world when it comes to Japan, that if you go in Spain in the metro, there's people screaming and shouting and everything everywhere, which is really annoying to me. In Japan, you're in a restaurant, no one is making a noise. Like people are talking like very quietly, people are very like calm and serene, and that's just like, honestly, when I came back from Japan, I was just like, I miss that so much, because I'm someone who like doesn't need to scream. I don't need to have like loud noises around me all the time, and Japanese people seem to be okay with that, as with like Western culture seem to like need to have this noise, like this crazy noise like all the time, which I hate. Another obvious thing is being in touch with nature, and I feel like that's something that, I mean, first thing, it's been proven that it reduces stress, it lets you sleep better, it reduces cortisol levels, arterial pressure, and all these things. But if you look at, like, obviously, like in Japanese, like big cities, it's probably going to be a bit more complicated. But even so, I've always seen that whenever you go into like a Japanese house in Tokyo, for example, people usually have more plans than, like, as if you see in other like countries, for example, or they have like more themes that are revolving around nature. And if you go to like any little small town, everything just has like a nature theme. Like they will have ponds in their garden, they will have like very like taken care of gardens. It's just like a different experience and a different feel, I think. As I said, like in Tokyo, in bigger cities, it's probably like a bit different because apartments in Japan are really small. But I've seen like even really small apartments, people really seem to prioritize like having plants or going to the park or going to temples or going to different places. Or even like when you're walking through the streets of like Osaka or whatever, you will see that there's like little parts of like green in the middle of nowhere, or little temples, or little moments that are kind of like calm and serene, you know. And I really like that because it just gives you this feeling of like that you're, even though you're in a city, you're kind of still connected to everything. Another thing is feeling and expressing gratitude. I've never seen a culture that's more grateful than the Japanese are whenever you give them anything. It's just like whenever like we had like a little detail or a gift with someone that we met there, people would be like so happy and so like, oh my god, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I feel like that allows them to just like, first thing, you at the end of the day rewire your brain into like looking for the positive things in life. So it's always good to like be appreciative of things and always be looking for things to be grateful for. But I feel like in the Japanese culture, it's kind of like a collective thing where like they're always like giving thanks. I don't know if it's because like of the religion that they have there, because I've seen that also in like Indonesia and other places, that when people are like Buddhist or kind of like tending into that like spiritual thinking, because Buddhism technically isn't a religion, you know. But I think that makes them also like be just happier with their lives, because they're always looking for a good thing. They're not looking to complain, and there's always like, there's not that many negative thoughts in your head if you're always looking for a positive thing, because you're always, you know how to appreciate life, and you know how to be like, okay, maybe I'm going through a bad time right now, but there's all of these good things in my life. So like, why would I be like super sad? Like, yeah, I might be sad for like a day or something because this specific thing happened, but I have all of these good things that I need to appreciate in my life as well. Another big thing that I and actually really admire from the Japanese is the fact that they are really like they put a lot of importance in like having values, even if people have different values, because obviously that's going to vary, but like the fact that everyone has their own values, because that's going to give you like a more meaningful life. Because if you live your life without any values or codes of, you know, of how you need to do things or how things should be done, you're not going to be able to live a fulfilling life. And one of the biggest like codes that they have is, for example, the code of the, is it the code, like the values of the Bushido, which is like the Japanese warrior, which is like honor, what's it called, bravery, and I don't know what the third one is. I mean, there's a lot of them, because there's obviously like there's also the code of the ninja, and then there's a lot of them. But I feel like the Japanese put a lot of effort and like, well, they place a lot of importance into like having values and a moral and kind of like guiding your life through that, which I think gives people a lot of like internal structure to be able to maybe not feel that lost in life. Because I feel like when people have their values and moral, they kind of like know, even if you're like a bit lost in life, you can kind of like know the path that you're going in. The other way, you're kind of like, you're okay with everything and then you don't really care, and you're kind of like being thrown in life from here to there, and you feel more lost, if that makes sense. I don't know, that's just a feeling that I have. Another habit that they have is the act of relativization. I think I said it correctly, but it's at the end of the day the fact of like, you don't really know when something's good or bad for you. Like, for example, it's something that can happen to you, that they can fire you from your job today and you can be like, oh my god, my life is over, this was like the job of my dreams, blah blah. But then the fact that they fired you, you'll see like 2 years later that it was actually like the biggest blessing from the universe. So you, like, I feel like the Japanese know how to relativize. I don't know if that's the word, but you know what I mean. Like, see things from like a relative point of view, relativity point of view. I don't know. Where you kind of know like, okay, maybe I'm going through a hard time right now, but maybe this is for the best, because you don't really know things until like you can kind of look at them from like from the future into the past. And I feel like sometimes here we are more of like, make everything into a drama and be like, oh, my life is over, this bad thing happened, blah 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 blah. And when it happens later that you realize like, oh, this was actually a good thing, then we are like, oh, this was actually the best thing ever, blah blah blah. But I feel like they're really able to kind of like calm themselves down, which brings me to another point of them, and it's like this Zen state that they are in. And with Zen, it obviously doesn't mean that you have, or that they have this point where like they don't feel anything, they're like stones, they're like, you know, it doesn't mean anything like that. It just means that they're able to see like there can be better and worse moments in life, and life just does this, and everything shall pass. And since they know that, they just know that, okay, I might be feeling sad, angry, whatever right now, but I'm not gonna let my emotions get the best of me. Because obviously when you make choices in your life, you can make choices from your values and morals, which for them is very important, or you can make choices from your irrational emotions that you're having this moment because something really bad happened. And if you act from these like irrational emotions, you're gonna give the worst of you, instead of just being like, okay, I might be feeling very angry right now, but maybe right now is not the best time to like send my boss an email who I hate, because maybe that's just gonna get out of hand. You know, you're gonna be like, let's calm down, and when I calm down, I'm gonna make this decision. It doesn't mean that you don't feel your feelings, doesn't mean that you avoid your feelings, it just means that you kind of like navigate your feelings in a way and you don't make rash decisions when you're in them. Another thing that I've actually really liked from them, and this is probably like one of my favorite habits ever from the Japanese, is being constant and being patient. Because like I feel like here, especially today, like we have things in seconds. Like whenever a web page takes like more than 5 seconds to load, we get like so frustrated, being like, oh my god, this is not loading, blah blah blah. And I think this translates also into the fact that whenever we're working in a project or something, we want results now, we want everything whatever, and we're not able to give things the time that they need to actually grow and kind of like take care of them, for it to kind of like develop the way that it has to, with the time that it needs to. Because things like that are worth your time, they're not going to take a day or 2 or 3 to develop. Sometimes they do, but it doesn't need to be your goal, you know. And I feel like this quote that I read a long time ago from like How Bamboo Grows is really like relevant to this, which is basically that bamboo, usually like when you plant a bamboo seed, it takes, I think it's from like, depends on the bamboo, from like 3 to 5 years for it to kind of like grow their their roots underground, and you don't see anything above ground. So you might be thinking like, did the bamboo die, is anything even happening there? But after those like 5 years go, in a matter of 6 months, the bamboo goes from the floor until like I don't know how many feet tall, which means like you need to like take your time, plant your roots, like really like make sure that you have really stable and strong roots, and then like the rest will happen. But you need to be very patient and consistent for that to happen. Another thing is that they take advantage of their resources like to the maximum, and they optimize everything. I mean, at the end of the day, Japan is a small island if you look at it, and if you really look at what they do, is like Japan really optimizes everything that they have, and like from the smallest thing, they will make a ton of different things. Like for example, if you look at soy, they will make 1,000 different like foods and sauces and things from soy by itself. And I think that really like contradicts the whole like belief that we have here, where like we're always like wanting more, being like, oh, I cannot work with this camera, I need a better camera, I need a better this, I need a better relationship, we're always kind of like wanting for more, when sometimes we haven't even used the whole potential of something that we already have. And I think that's something that I've actually learned with when it comes to like starting with like a project that you're doing or something like that, that you don't need to get like this fancy equipment or this contact or this or that. You can just start with whatever you have now, make the most of what you have now, and then over time things will obviously like improve. You will get better equipment, better contacts, better whatever, but you need to start with what you have now and just make the most, because you always have something that you can start with. Even if it's little, and even if it doesn't seem like a lot to you, it's probably even more than what other people already have. So like make good use of it. Another thing is investing in quality instead of like cheap stuff. It doesn't need to be like necessarily that something cheap is not going to be good quality, but usually like it's better that you invest. For example, if you want a nice coat for the winter, that you don't just buy like the cheapest thing that's just going to break in like a few days, weeks or whatever, but also that you're like, okay, instead of just going for whatever thing, let's just like wait a little bit, look for something that's quality, do a bit of research, and just buy something that makes more sense in the long run. Because I feel like in the Western world, we live everything fast. Instead of going slow, we do everything fast. We want this newest like coat from Zara or whatever, and then it goes to shit in a few weeks, and then it's just like, oh, I need to buy another one, or the quality was not really good, or it broke down, or whatever. When it's like you can have something that's durable and better in the long run, that's also going to be better for the planet, and it's going to also be more conscious, and you don't need to be kind of like going for trends, which I feel like the Japanese, I mean, obviously every country will go or have their fashion trends and everything, but I feel like they go into that route through like a more minimalistic point of view, if that makes sense. The next one is the concept of gambaru, which reminds me a lot of like, I don't know if this is Jujutsu Kaisen when they say gambare gambare senpai, which at the end of the day is when like you're saying to someone like, give your best, or good luck, or like do your best. So it means that at the end of the day, you might have a goal that's like up here, but you cannot be like, oh, I'm not going to do anything because I'm like down here right now. But you need to always be thinking like, okay, I'm going to give my best being here, and I'm going to enjoy the process instead of looking at this thing right here where like I'm not even close to this. Because what that means is that if you give your best being here, that's going to make you improve a little bit. And at some point you will get there, but you will have enjoyed the process because you will have always felt like, oh my god, I'm doing the best with what I have right now and with what I can do right now, instead of being like, oh, I'm not giving this here, because you're obviously not even there yet, you know? So I feel like that's a great way to see like any type of thing that you do in life. Whenever you start with something new and you're a beginner again, or you're starting with a project or an entrepreneurship or a company or a job or whatever it is, it's just like, do what you feel like, okay, I'm gonna give my best today. Not even my best of right now, it's just like my best today, which might be like, I'm tired today, I'm this and this and that, but today I gave my best considering all of these things, you know? And if you do that, you will live a happier life at the end of the day, because you will know like, oh, I gave my best, but not compared to this thing that I'm not even there yet, but compared to myself and like my best self today. Which also brings me to the next one, that is like, I feel like Japanese people are very much more connected to the cycles and kind of like respecting the cycle that you're in. Can be hormonal cycles, can be daily cycles of like day and night, it can be like seasons, it can be anything in life, you know? Like there will be moments in your life where you will be like way more tired and be like, oh my god, I'm having a period of my life where like, I don't know, maybe someone died or something, and you just need to take it easy on yourself, and you don't have that much energy, and that is okay, and you need to kind of do what you can with that at that moment. And maybe there's going to be other periods of your life where you will be super energetic and you will have energy for like 5 people, and then you're going to be able to do a lot of the things that you were not able to go and do here. So I feel like life is always fluctuating, and you always need to be adapting to that, instead of kind of like living out of harmony with yourself and your own cycles. And like if you're a woman, you also have hormonal cycles playing into that, so always being very mindful of that and not working against you, but just kind of like getting to know yourself, knowing when you work best, how you work best, and making the most out of that. And lastly, a concept that you've probably seen, like, well, if you've seen anime in general, maybe you've never seen anime, I'm a big anime fan, but I feel like every anime, or most of the animes that have like a bit of a spiritual and like magic meaning, they always have a representation of the chi energy. I think it's pronounced chi in English, maybe it's ki, I have no idea, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong, but at least in Spanish it's chi. At the end of like what they believe to be like the Japanese, Chinese, or like Chinese medicine, I think it is that chi energy is kind of like a limited energy that you were born with and you're gonna carry throughout your life. And the more like you kind of like put all your energy into this one thing, for example, let's say like you're gonna focus on this phone, you're gonna have to like put all your energy into this little ball, and this ball was gonna focus on this phone. But if instead you're focusing on like a lot of like 300 different things, like your energy is gonna kind of like disperse a lot and kind of like try to get to all of these different things, and you're not going to be able to do anything right, and you're just going to not feel very well physically and emotionally. And I feel like that's something that when I started learning about this concept, I started to see it, how it played out in my life. You know, for example, if I'm really concentrated of like, oh, I'm playing the piano and I'm doing this thing and learning or whatever, and I'm like 100% focused on that task, I can really like do that and develop and learn and become better. But if I'm always like trying to like, oh, I'm going to think of this person and I need to do this project, I need to do this and this and that, I somehow just like, I'm like, oh, I want to procrastinate, I don't want to do anything, because like your energy is like so spread out that you need to kind of like bring it back together and be like, okay, one task, one thing, just focus on that thing, and then the next thing, and then the next thing. But if you let your energy spread out too much and just go to like 1,000 different other things, you're never gonna be able to do anything, because you're just gonna not even feel good inside of yourself. And that's what I feel like procrastination and laziness and all of these things come in. So these were all of the habits that I have found about, read about, or like similar things. If you have any others that you want to recommend, or you want to recommend me any books of like Japanese other habits and things like that, you can do it in the comments below, and I'll see you guys next time.